This is 1 in 44, a presentation of Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 44 is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 44, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism. And with me this morning is Lifetime star, Geege Taylor from Leave It to Geege, which is a show streaming on Lifetime and available on the mylifetime.com, the Lifetime app, and video on demand. Geege, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Hello. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I am doing well. Thanks for being here.
Great.
For those of you who may not know about Leave It to Geege, I took a look at some of your episodes and was really fascinated by your story, by your openness, by your attitude, which is all about positivity from what I can gather.
Right.
And really was also struck by the circle of people that you surround yourself and your family with. So rather than me trying to explain this, tell us all about yourself and Leave It to Geege, please.
Well, first of all, did you love the show?
I did. I found it I found it compelling. I have to say, just the all the different characters who are real people. I call them characters, but really, I mean, these are people in your life. And the thing that I think really drew me in was there was a scene in which you talk a lot about your choice, which seems like a daily, maybe moment to moment choice to be positive, to think of good and kindness, and it's not that you don't acknowledge that there's challenges and hardships and that you've been through that and your family's been through that, but to where you choose to focus. And I think that I would think resonates with a lot of people, either because they feel the same way or because they strive to.
Right. And that's the whole reason that I wanted to do the show was my son, who we affectionately call Pootie, is 19 and non-speaking. And, when he was diagnosed so many years ago at 18 months, there was just hardly any talk about autism in the media. I didn't know a thing about it. And once we started, I navigated my way through and figured things out. And I started seeing a little bit more in the media about it. And everything that I saw seemed very, very negative. It sort of treated the whole subject like this heavy, medical, dense, heavy, subject. And we just weren't living a life like that. I mean, yeah, sure. It's, you've got your challenges with someone who's nonverbal and someone who struggles with a lot of things that we take for granted. But otherwise, we're just, I just made a decision early on. I didn't want autism to be something that just sort of was all we thought about, because I was like, this is one part of my son and he is a part of our family and we all have our stuff that we're doing and stuff that's going on. So I just decided to sort of give him everything that we could as far as therapy and every advantage that we were able to throw at him and, but be positive and just celebrate him for who he was, not who we thought we could make him be through tons of therapy, and so don't get me wrong. I'm not, we're big into therapy and have all of our therapy goals and, our whole life, seems to be carrying out those goals. But, I just didn't want it to be where everything I said to him was no, because so many times, people who have autism, they're being redirected to, no, do something this way. Let's make it more functional. Do it this way. And I feel like in the back of their minds, they're constantly being told no. And, no, it's not neurotypical. Let's just keep getting there till we get neurotypical. And I think with my son being more severe on the spectrum, it was even more, that way for us. And I just felt like, I'm always going to try to make his life better and give him every advantage. But I also want to just celebrate him and let him have a mama who adores him for everything he is, And so once I got to that place of just, okay, I'm just going to let myself breathe a little bit because it's very daunting thinking, I've got therapy goals in my refrigerator that are 10 miles long. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy what God gave me all around me, my son, my daughter, everybody else. And and I just kind of vowed to be positive because I've always been a positive person anyway, but I didn't want this to kind of like take me down, and I was like, we're having a good life. Yeah, we've got struggles, but my daughter's hard too. She's totally neurotypical. I promise you right now, honey, she gives me more problems than my son.
Right, well,
Introduce
us to your family a little bit. Who is your daughter? How old is she?
So, my daughter is, and these, all of these people are, you'll see in the show. My daughter's 24. Mm-hmm. She is graduating this semester from the University of Georgia. She's a portrait artist, beautiful portrait artist, very, very eccentric, kind of quirky, eclectic little somebody. And she brings like this deadpan humor to the show, which is just so spot on. She might be the funniest one on there. And then my son's caregiver lives with me. His name's Tyler. Mm-hmm. And he is my best friend. He's my son's caregiver. He's my roommate, and he is going through during the season, he's going through the steps to getting an adult diagnosis of autism.
Yes.
So I'm not going to say whether he gets that or not.
Right.
Maybe doing what you do for a living, you might have an opinion. Like I certainly am thinking that he's got autism. But but what's so great about it is the show has 4 young adults with autism, and they're all over the spectrum. So we've got my son, who's non-speaking. We've got, Tyler, who might be autistic, who would be, he's a freaking genius. And then we've got his brother, Cleet, who has autism, moderate autism, and cerebral palsy, and a few other things going on. And then Nikki, who is one of Pootie's best friends, and his mama is one of my best friends. And he's amazing young man. He's hilarious. He's the most inspiring person. He's great.
Yeah.
So what's great about this show is, you're seeing these raw, unscripted moments. And I know that there are more and more shows now, thank God, about autism, but there's still not enough, right? So to me, this is the first of its kind of just a real, raw, unscripted show with 4 kids with autism. And the thing you'll see is that they're all just living the dream. They're so happy. They're all celebrated for who they are. They're all celebrated for what they bring to the table that nobody else ever could. And I mean, to me, it's an amazing thing. And if we've done our job right when you're watching the show, you're going to forget you're watching a show about autism, because there's just going to be that equality there where everybody's on the same, everybody's on a level playing field. We don't treat each other different because we have some differences. We all have our differences. So, the show's super heavy on the humor. And, it's just like any other reality show. We just happen to throw in, 4 adults with autism. And I think it's a beautiful thing. But so that's they're in the show. My mom's in the show, Puddin', very Southern, very, very religious grandmama who's, often very disturbed by me because I'm a little bit out of the box. I have sort of a foul mouth. I'm trying to watch my tongue on this podcast. But so it's a big cast. My boyfriend lives in London. And so he's kind of back and forth to the States, and I'm back and forth to see him. So you'll see him a little bit. You'll see him coming into episode 5 and staying with me throughout. So so basically, to answer your question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You asked about half an hour ago. The whole show was based on a positive look at autism and loving the idea of, if we are educating people about autism and about how amazing these people's lives are who are living with autism, I feel like it demystifies it, where people really are going to look at it and think, oh, that's just another normal family. You know what I mean? And I love that. Our showrunner, her mom was watching the show, and she said later she saw somebody in a store who was having a meltdown, and they clearly had autism. And she said she would have never known that before. She would have just stared at them like, get yourself together. Why are you screaming at the store? And she said at that point, she found herself just saying, is there anything I can do? Do you need anything to drink? Can I go help? Yeah.
What a
and
beautiful
then I was like,
thing.
Beautiful. Job done.
A beautiful thing. You're really opening my eyes also up to the fact that there's so many different ways to get there, which to me, having worked so closely with so many of the families who send their children, their loved ones, children and adults to Anderson, which is primarily a residential program for children and adults with autism who are predominantly non-vocal, non-speaking, and also engage in quite often pretty serious, challenging behaviors, whether it's self-injurious or, otherwise. But that moment in a store where somebody has the realization that they can also just say, can I help you?
Yeah.
Even if that person says no, or what they really need is for you to leave,
Right.
give them space. So different than judgment and fear.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I was talking to somebody the other day, also a guardian who I knew through Anderson, who's also a caregiver, and she has 3 young children, and she was telling me that because her children grew up with their parents both working in the field and being very connected to some people who live in like a group home setting, who are non-speaking, who communicate in different ways, who have their ups and downs or good days, bad days. That he was talking to another parent who said, I want my kids to look at autism the way your kids look at autism. So all of this is coming together for me in that, and you mentioned the TV shows, there are more of them out there now, but they're very different. And who's to judge which way is going to best help somebody watching come to a new way of making a decision, or a new way of thinking, or being in a store and recognizing just a family doing their thing, living their life. So I appreciate you telling us that. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I'm going to have a couple of questions for you just about some of the day in, day out reality stuff, and what it's like to honestly be followed around with cameras, because I can't imagine that one. This is 1 in 44, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and we'll be right back.
And now, 1 in 44 continues on 100.7 WHUD. This is a weekly community affairs program presented by the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 44, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and I'm talking today with Geege Taylor, who is the star of Leave It to Geege, although I'm sure you would say there are multiple stars. You just went through the whole group on the show. Leave It to Geege is streaming on Lifetime, and you can also watch it on mylifetime.com and the Lifetime app and video on demand. And it's the story of, I'm not going to say it's the story of your son, Pootie, because it sounds like it's the story of your whole family and your circle of, family, those those who are connected by blood and those you chose to be part of your family. And I really am struck just by the impact that what you chose to do and what you're choosing every day to do is having, and the potential for that to happen for even more people. Let me ask you this. You are a mom with a 19-year-old, a 24-year-old, a bunch of other people, some of whom live in your home.
Yes.
Traveling to and from London to see your significant other and having him travel back and forth. And here you are with your mom, who I also want to ask some questions about the relationship. But you are followed by cameras in order to make this show.
Right. Yeah.
Does that just feel natural? Does it ever get in the way? Does it ever cause a problem?
No. For me, it was natural to do this. We had started our own YouTube channel and had made 25 little short episodes. Mm-hmm. And to back up, about 8 years ago, we made a pilot sorry, I've got somebody calling me. About 8 years ago, we had made a pilot for another network, and they wound up not taking it. And I think now the time is right. There's a lot more talk about autism now than there was 8 years ago, even, and more in the media. So I think the time was right. But they didn't take it, and I was like, okay, well, whatever, it's meant to be. So years later, I started making some little YouTube short videos, and I mean, they are just hilarious. And when Tyler moved in with me, he's just so funny. We have such a great, kind of back and forth with each other. So we made all these little things, and then I sent one of them back to the production company who helped me all those years ago. Mm-hmm. And the guy was like, who owns a company, which is a huge World of Wonder, huge production company in Hollywood. They're amazing. And he was like, I still love this, and usually in Hollywood, once you pitch something and it's over, and he's like, I love this. I like it even better. The kids are older. They've got a lot going on in their lives. And so I just knew, I felt like after making all those little short videos, we loved it. We just found that we would turn our little phone on and start taping and die laughing and having a great time. And, I just think that we were the ones to tell that story. We have, sorry, when my phone rings off, sorry. I just felt like I was the one to tell that story. My family was the one that, they wanted to tell the story. And, this filming is intense. It was almost 4 months and they're 10-hour days.
Wow.
We got 2 days a week off. But it was one thing that I thought, this is something I could do with my life. I can make a little bit. You don't get rich, but I can make a little bit of money. It could be a job for me. My son can have a job making some money. And we can put out this amazing message that we're hoping to educate people while we're softly educating them. You're being entertained so much, I think you don't realize, wow, I'm learning so much as I go with this, and inspire people. So I felt like, okay, we've got a message. I want to put it out there. I'm very creative. I love doing that kind of stuff. So it's like, let's just, we'll do it. And if it sucks, we won't do it again. But it wound up being great. We fell in love with the whole crew. And what it looks like, especially for somebody with autism, is for Pootie, a lot of kids would have a lot of trouble with a bunch of people coming to the house. They don't know. You're not on my schedule. Where did you come from? What are we doing with, why are you in here? So I knew that Pootie would be great with it. That was one reason I really wanted to do it, because we've always kind of made him very sociable. I'm really a bad therapist, to be honest with you. Pootie gets therapy all day long. I make him toe the line, and, he's got his goals, but, just kind of laying the love down on him is my specialty. And I feel like he's so loved that just makes him kind of cocky. It's just a cute thing to see. He's like, oh, everybody's obsessed with me, so he's got a little attitude, which is cute. But I just knew that, I had kind of always exposed him to a lot of social things. So I thought, he's the kid to do this, because he loves people. He is not bothered sensory wise. He doesn't mind if somebody comes up to him. He bonds with people very quickly. He wound up just falling in love with the 2 cameramen. And there's only 2 cameramen. So, the rest of the crew of 15, they're outside under tents, looking on monitors and doing stuff. And then so we've got 2 cameras, and they're just backed off in the corners and zooming in. But they made all of these great sort of things for modifications for Pootie. They hung the lights in the ceiling so that he didn't have a big light blaring in his face. They were all sensitivity trained and trained in autism. Every bit of the crew. So they all came in understanding autism and asking intelligent questions about it. And they just knew, if things go south, we're going to back off and we'll shut it all down for the day, if need be. We never had to shut it down once. Pootie did great. He had a great summer. He continued to do his normal deal too. He went to camp all day. So we were sort of filming around him. I didn't want to make his life different. So if he did not want to be a part of what we were doing, he would just, go. People would be like, how can he consent? I was like, he can't, but he can descent. He can leave the room and go do his own thing.
Right.
His mom, I'm making a decision for him, because I feel like this is something, he had all these different opportunities with the show. He has a way to make his own money, and he's got a way to share this huge message. And, he loved it. He loved every bit of it. And I knew that he would. I knew he was the kid to do that. So that's how we came about with that. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's great to know the idea that it's also technology wise, the idea that you could capture a show like this with so much action going on with 2 cameras, but that's the life we live in now. You don't need to have, huge amounts of equipment right in people's face. So, that's what I'm hearing about more and more, is that there's more of an interest and an understanding that you need to have some training. You need to have some understanding. You just said something that I think is so important to most families raising a loved one with autism is, I don't mind if you ask me questions, but ask reasonable questions if possible.
Exactly.
There's questions out there that I'm always going to answer you, but sometimes you don't want to be, the 101 educator on all things autism.
Exactly.
So I would think that would be exhausting. So I like that. I think that's really cool.
So great. It was so great because I didn't have to explain why is he stimming and what is he doing that for and how does he feel about that? I didn't have to do any of that. It was amazing. I mean, of course we had to kind of teach them all things Pootie, right? But it was just it was so refreshing to have. Well,
but that's also the differentiation between Pootie, the individual person, and Pootie representing all people with autism, which is not what we're trying to do.
Yes, exactly.
If you're making a documentary about any family or any person or any group of people, you're still going to have to understand who that person is.
Exactly.
I appreciate what I see as some level of forward momentum in our society around the idea that people with autism are people first.
Exactly.
And so that to me is an important thing to to kind of shed light on. So I think that's cool.
And that's exactly the point you're making. They're people first. That's my point of, when you watch the show, you're going to forget that you're watching a show about autism. It's going to, hopefully it's going to be so, you'll just sort of learn along with it.
Right. It's a show about people.
It's a show about all kinds of people and lots of different storylines. And very few of the storylines have anything to do with autism. Although, I don't want to say storylines because it's unscripted, but, Tyler's journey to getting a diagnosis, that's great because it really is educating and it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, what's going on with the other guys? It's just them living their lives. So it's amazing. It's a privilege to be able to share that.
Well, on that note, we only have a couple more minutes. I was hoping you could just give us a minute or two on what has the public response been to you? What is
it's been great.
Feedback are you getting? What kind of feedback do you get from friends and family who maybe aren't a part of the show? Is there, sense of what you're getting?
You're walking a very tight line when you make a show like this, because there's just, you're representing a marginalized community who, until now has not had much of a voice. And you want to make them proud. Like, I want to do anybody who is on the spectrum of autism, I want to do them proud. I want them to feel like their voices are heard and they're being, I want these people to be glorified for the amazing people they are. And I feel like we did that. And to me, it means everything. So I feel like, tell me your original question.
No, just what the feedback is. Do you get
the feedback
commentary from the public, from viewers, from?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I get a little distracted in my mind. I'm menopausal, honey. So I just kind of I get off of. But yeah, so I was kind of a little bit nervous, thinking, I hope that I do this community right, and we have gotten an overwhelmingly wonderful, lovely response. I mean, I get DMs every day on my Instagram, which is actually, you can find me at Geege Taylor, Geege Taylor, Taylor. And I get so many beautiful messages of, a lot of times it's with younger families that have younger kids who have just been diagnosed and maybe they're non-speaking like Pootie. And they're like, this has been a hard road. We've been, maybe some of them are depressed or sad or, and then they're like, but we look at your family and how happy you are and how, I always say we're happier with autism in our lives than we ever were without it. So, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So I feel like, so many families are like, this gives us hope, or we love this, or finally something we can relate to. There's never anything like this, on television. So we've gotten such an amazing response. So it's been great. I'd love to keep it going. I'd love to get another season. I'd love to keep it going. But
so let's repeat that again. So people know where to go to get in touch with you. It's Geege Taylor, Geege, Taylor.
Yes.
And
that's my Instagram.
That's Instagram, and people can get info to you that way. And watch the show. Leave It to Geege, streaming on Lifetime and on Videos on Demand and Lifetime app. I just wish you the best. I think it's really cool. I think for decades there was and still is a need for the serious, the research, the education, the focus on opportunities and access, and that's still a need. But isn't it cool that we're at a point where you and some others are starting to really touch on the lives, the stories, the people, it all is necessary, and sharing that positive outlook and the fact that you can choose every day to just share your lives. Not everybody would do that. And so I'm sure you're impacting a lot more people than you probably even realize. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And you will get that piece too. You get in the family and the human piece, but yes. Tyler is also a BCBA and he's getting ready to start his PhD in special ed. So we hear a lot from special educators and especially behavioral therapists that just love the show.
Yeah, I would not.
Like the show is poetry with the therapy. You're getting to see it in action, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting comment too. Very that the board certified behavior analysts are probably not all too often getting opportunities like this to showcase their work and be a part of a project like this. So check it out. Leave It to Geege. Geege Taylor, I really want to thank you for being on the show today. It was a real pleasure talking to you. And
thanks so much for having me.
Keep watching and look forward to both the entertainment and a little bit of education thrown in there for good measure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. This is 1 in 44, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 44, a weekly presentation of the Anderson Center for Autism. Join us for another edition of the show at this time next weekend.